This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Literacy Mindset. Very, very excited about my guest today, Miss Catina Taylor, who is the founder of Dreams KC, which is a nonprofit working to empower parents and communities in their pursuit of literacy. Welcome to the show. Well, I'm very excited to have you here. Our conversation will be rich, I'm sure, with a lot of things to talk about. Excited to hear about things that you have going on at Dreams KC. And so we're going to dive right in. We're just going to talk and go. So can you just help set the stage a tiny bit? Tell our audience a little bit about how it is that you got to where you're at in this seat and what you got going with Dreams.
One thing I will say is that you are not lost if you do not have a linear path. That's one thing I will say.
Love it.
Again, my name is Catina Taylor. I'm the founder and CEO of Dreams KC, born and raised right here in Kansas City, Missouri. I always point that out because we have a Kansas City, Kansas, as well as a Kansas City, Missouri.
Dividing line there, yes.
Yes, I am a product of Kansas City Public Schools. I attended Avila University, where I majored in pre-law, political science, and paralegal studies. Then I went to KU Law School. Never in my wildest imagination did I ever think that I'd be in the educational ecosystem. But I am and have been for the last 25 years. After I finished law school, I thought I'd be practicing entertainment law, retire by 40, hang out with some fun celebrities, make all the money, the things. But life has a way of happening. My father became ill. I found myself back in Kansas City without any market, so to speak, for entertainment law. So I asked the question, you're going to get serious. What are you going to do next? So I ventured into entrepreneurship and realized, it's going to take a while for that to become profitable. What else?
Right.
Kansas City Public Schools at the time had a teacher shortage, not unlike we're experiencing today in 2025. And I said that was the great opportunity for me to go back and give something to the school district who has started me on my journey. And my journey was rich. I felt like I had great teachers and a wonderful educational experience. And that's what I wanted other students to have, that looked like my son, that was in my community. I lived amongst these families. And I thought, let me give back. So I went into a middle school, English language arts classroom, middle school. Can you imagine? And
hot out of the gate. Okay.
And I realized something very quickly is that many of my students struggled with literacy.
Okay.
And thank God I had amazing administrators. I had a ton of professional development. I had amazing mentors along the way. And so I began to really eat, sleep, and breathe literacy and education. I've run for school board. I've worked in the traditional public school, charter schools, as well as private schools. And one thing was true is that no matter the environment that Black and brown or poor children found themselves in, urban, rural, etc., across this country, we were failing in terms of literacy and had been for quite some time. And I believe wholeheartedly that literacy is liberation, that once you learn to read, you are forever free, a quote by Frederick Douglass. And I wanted to be a solution. And I tutored for a really long time. So one student at a time, you have an impact. But the issue, the problem that we're attempting to solve is so great that I felt like other people can do this work. It doesn't need to be me. And so I asked myself the question, who was being left out of the conversation, the equation, the solution? And the answer came back to me as parents. We say they are the first and most important teachers of their children. We say that we should be holding them accountable and responsible for being partners in the educational journey of their children. But we haven't equipped them to support their children. So it has to be a team. Teachers are being overworked. They're being asked to do more and more. They can't do it all. But parents, teachers have 20 plus kids in a classroom. Parents may have 1 to 5. In extreme cases, 1 to however many.
A lot more than 5, but generally, right.
My father was 1 of 13. So,
right.
But generally, families have a more manageable number, right? They have flexibility in ways that teachers don't have. And they know their children better than us. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to empower parents to do the work that I do. They can do it. I know that they can, and they want to do it. And so that's how Dreams KC came about. And that's how we came along as a 501c3 nonprofit social enterprise. I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. But it's really our core tenet is that we empower parents with the tools they need to teach their children foundational literacy skills.
Got it. So law school grad turned literacy advocate through a means of an emergency certification to get into a classroom, which spawned basically a tremendous amount of research across a now long career on reading and literacy and the things that maybe keep it out of reach. Sometimes we talk amongst ourselves in Mindplay and how we think about what we need to do out there. And we talk a little bit about what are barriers to success.
Yes.
Right. What are the things that sort of stand in the way of students being able to read proficiently? And of course, we have science of reading, and we know that there are foundational skills, and we can kind of talk about them. But it'd be interesting to hear from you, just like, how would you describe what you've seen over the years that you've been doing this, and what do you sort of coach parents on to identify maybe some of these barriers to success?
Yeah, one of the things I love to do with parents first is just talk about myth versus fact.
Okay.
Like,
let's go there.
Did you know children aren't born hardwired to learn to read? That generally is like an eye-opener for parents, right? Or I attack the myth of reading to your children. Don't teach your children how to read.
Turns out that
what do you mean?
Osmosis, like just hearing the words, doesn't actually help you.
And it has its place, but I often, I love shock value, right? So as I'm speaking or talking to folks, I often, shock them with, we've been lied to. We have been lied to, because I'm a parent too. I'm a grandparent. And what we have been told is read to your children, read to your children, read to your children. Like you said, as if they're going to learn to read by osmosis. No, it has to be intentionality. It has to be consistency, right? And the barriers, time. They think that they have to have money for materials and supplies in ways that they don't often. The lack of their own literacy, right? Like we have to talk about that, and that's uncomfortable for some families, because as adults, that's embarrassment and shame attached to that inability to be fully literate. And how am I then supposed to teach my children if I'm struggling? Because the data tells us, and I'll talk about the Kansas City data, 85% of African-American third graders are reading 2 or more grade levels behind. The data tells us that out of that 85%, 75% of those same children have adults in their lives that have their own literacy challenges.
Wow.
So what I say to them is you still can do it. You can, while you're learning to teach your children, you're actually addressing your own literacy challenges. So that 2-gen approach. Oftentimes we in the education space want parents to conform to our schedule,
to
our rules, the way in which we do things. And I'm going, but aren't we supposed to be meeting them where they are? If you have an hourly wage parent, they can't be at a school for early morning, muffins with
Accepting.
mom or donuts with dads to come and learn some quick literacy lesson. But can we go out to their homes? Can we meet them in the library? Can they jump online? Can we do it after school when they're already going to be there for something else? So really just thinking through what barriers families face in their everyday lives, asking questions of them. What is it that you need from us? And then constructing things around what they say they need and want is going to be the key. But we certainly know time, money, and aptitude oftentimes are the biggest barriers, or so they think.
At least the perceived barriers there. Yeah, we talk sometimes about phonological barriers, like that sort of surfaces a lot in the phonological realm, right?
Yes.
Of that, and decoding can be an important part of the phonological skills needed to have success. But what you've done some work relative to decoding and decodable text. Tell me about it a little bit, and how have you seen that sort of take off or influence, or just some of your takeaways from
I tell parents, I tell teachers, I tell community members, anyone that is in the support of literacy development of children and families, something very simple. We are building confident and competent readers. Okay. What do I mean by that is if we teach them early on consonant letter sounds, and then we zero in on, say, short vowels, for example.
Right.
So say I teach M, S, A, and T at the same time. Okay. They learn those sounds, and then they can immediately begin to put those sounds together to make words and formulate sentences. Children will say, oh my God, I'm reading. They get excited, right? Because all kids want to learn to read. That's like the mark in their mind of intelligence and growth. And I'm a big kid now, right?
Right.
And the moment they have that win, that short, quick win, we're building their confidence. They're wanting to read more, practice more. Okay. We know that with practice comes competence, right? And it begins to be this flywheel. Now, what we know in business is once that flywheel starts moving, right, it self-propels.
Right.
As long as we keep feeding it along the way, readjusting as we go. And so that's kind of the way in which I think about this work. It's like we're getting this flywheel going. So that phonological awareness very early on, clapping out syllables or tapping or snapping. Nursery rhymes. I did not know how many children are not exposed to nursery rhymes like I was.
Interesting.
But how do we do it in 2025 in ways that Hickory Dickory Dock was fun for maybe you and I, but not for these kids?
Right.
But they love rap, right? How do we bring that into the fold? Spoken word, right? Those are things that children and teenagers love in 2025 in a way that we weren't exposed to. Alliteration. I will never forget learning Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. My mother challenged us with that. How fast can you go? But you think about it in 2025, how do we do that with children now so that they start to play with sounds very, very early, building that auditory, phonological brain. We're building those neural pathways that they'll need to access later around the spoken word, around how letters and symbols, phonemes and graphemes work. And I use that terminology. I say, what's a phoneme? It's the smallest unit of sound. What's a grapheme? It's just a letter, it's just a symbol. It can be anything, right? Because it's arbitrary. Our system is arbitrary, but these are the symbols that have a sounds attached to them. I talk about, hey, parents, did you know we have, 26 letters in the alphabet, but we have 44 sounds? But you need to learn these. That we don't do a on the end of a letter sound. And why don't we do it that way? And I talk about how blending, right? If I learn at, versus right? That makes it more difficult when they get ready to blend that word mat, because they'll say matta, right? And so just simple things that they can do very early on. I gamify it. I want it to be fun. I tell parents, don't make this boring. You don't want to be bored. They don't want to be bored. Let's make it fun. How can we, address the creative kid, the body kinesthetic learner, the kid that loves tech, dare I say, because we talk a lot about, minimizing screen time. I say, I'm not willing to fight that fight. I am willing to say to a child that loves a tablet, a phone, or a computer, or a television, or whatever, how can we do this most effectively so you're learning first before the fun?
Mm-hmm. Or how do we make sure that learning is fun?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's your point that you were just saying is that if we can get some degree of excitement that's happening, there's a real internal motivation that can happen of like, I get the right chemicals in my brain firing when I'm learning.
Yeah.
So would you say that, to the phonemes and the graphemes and the constructed text, parents, is it just about them coming up with rhyming words and rapping it to their kids, or how do they find resources for this?
So
go to the library. What?
I wish they could go to the library.
I will say that right?
More and more libraries, especially on the East Coast, I will say, have partnered with an organization like Teach My Kids to Read, for example, that has taken on the task of educating librarians about decodable texts. Decodable text, for those of you that don't know, we have multiple types of children's books, right? So we have our traditional trade books, the story books that you read to your children. You're doing that work. We have books like You Read to Me, I Read to You, where there's paired reading. A parent reads a line, a kid reads a line. We have readers theater, right? Where for that creative kid that loves to act things out, hey, there we go. And we have decodable texts, which are foundational to supporting that early literacy learner or that middle schooler or high schooler that has some gaps in those foundational skills, right? So what are decodable texts? They isolate a very specific skill that has already been taught. Now they need to practice it, has some success. That text is 75% decodable. The other, 75 to 80%. The remainder of the text is usually high frequency words, or what we know as sight words, right? That these are words that they are often exposed to in children's books, children's textbooks, things like that very early on, that eventually become sight words because they know them by sight. So, and they should be high interest, right? It's hard with a limited vocabulary to make a decodable excitable, but I think we can do it. We know the traditional story arc. And so how do we do it in a way that is going to be interesting to children? Dreams has created a set of decodables. And what we've done is characters look like the children. They have names that perhaps they'll know someone in their family with that name, like a Rob or a Kim or, a Ed. I don't know. And what I've done also for my local community, one of the books is called Rob's Big Job, focusing on the short O sound.
Got it.
But I remember my dad and my brother, both are Robert. And I remember going to the barbershop with my dad when I was young. And so an iconic barbershop here is called Sportsman's Barbershop. Well, that's the setting of this particular book, right? And so, doing things like that in text. A parent sent me a screenshot of her daughter reading my other decodable, Kyla Meets the Bees. And her caption was, "My daughter said she looks just like me." I was in tears, right?
Yeah, right.
Because when they see themselves, they're going to want to pick that book up. Oh, she looks like me, or she has my favorite color on her. I know someone with that name, or I love dogs, or I love cat, like whatever the story arc is. So we want to make those materials, those supplies, those games, those activities, a point of connection for our children so that they want to pick them up. And we know in the book sector, whether it's trade books, decodables, or what have you, 2% of authors or stories generally feature children or families of color.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done on that front. I agree. So sometimes in the literacy and parenting world, we're talking about young readers, right? Pre-readers, like we're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. But there's also sort of this segment of the parenting world that maybe it didn't happen, right? Now I'm in 7th grade. Maybe I'm reading in the 3rd or 4th grade level. What can I do as a parent there?
Yeah.
Am I still trying to find decodables? Probably not. They're probably already decoding, right?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So
and more often than not, comprehension is the challenge for our older, I call them our adolescent literacy learners.
Okay.
And the way in which we think about adolescence generally is we hear that word, we think in terms of physical development. So they'll hear adolescent and think teenagers. Right. In the education space, when we talk about adolescent literacy learners, we're talking about 4th grade and above, right?
Right.
And so for those children, interestingly enough, I'm doing a series every Tuesday online on Facebook in a private Facebook group, specifically in 2025 for parents of adolescent literacy learners. But I spent all of 2024 talking to parents of our early literacy learners.
Right.
And so the skills are the skills. They do not change. So I'm very clear to let parents know that. We have to assess and figure out why those adolescent literacy learners are still struggling. Where is the gap? What skill was not mastered that we need to go back and reteach and practice so that they get to mastery, right? So I say to parents, the skill is the skill. It does not change. We assess and figure out where the gap may be. And then we do some of the same activities and use some of the same strategies. But we bring the activity up so that we're not demeaning them, right? We're not minimizing that they are 4th, 5th, 12th grade, whatever. We want to ensure, though, that they get the skills and they're not being made to feel like babies. And so while the skill set is the same, the strategy, the activity that we use may be different because it is an older learner, right? So what are they interested in? Are we finding texts around their interests? What's their favorite movie? What's their favorite video game? And how can we then pull out what they need from the things that they're already interested in and spending time with to teach the skills, reteach the skills, and get them to mastery? And that looks different for every single kid. I wish we could say, hey, here's a formula that works for every single kid. Not true.
Doesn't.
So I'm often very careful to say, do this one thing and it's going to be the silver bullet for every single kid, because that's just not true.
Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit, one of the, looking back to barriers sometimes to success in the adolescent literacy learners is sort of the interaction that can happen even in the school setting, right? So whether it's IEP plans, right, or 504 plans, and the barrier between maybe the teacher and the parent is there. And then, like, on the one hand, there's a part of me that wants to say, like, if parents could be a bit more vulnerable, right, in moments like that, and say, I don't know what you're talking about, but I would like to learn about that. But culturally, sometimes we've made that very difficult for that vulnerability to happen, right? It's like,
absolutely.
I'm not going to show up here and convey to someone in my child's life that I don't know that. So the other end of that is educating the parents in some way, shape, or form, if it's not happening there, on what's meaningful to them. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we have to create environments in education that are welcoming to parents so that they can be vulnerable. We have to ensure them that we care enough about them and their child to work alongside, to be partners in the work. I have on a blazer today. Very rarely would I have one on if I'm standing in front of parents, right? I am not my brother or sister's keeper. I am my brother or sister. So even the way in which we talk, the way in which we dress, the way in which we interact and engage with families really sets the tone. Are we partnering here? Or are we creating an environment where you're coming in and we're just going to talk at you and tell you what to do and not really develop relationship, right? And have sympathy, empathy, and compassion for the parents and families that we are dealing with. And we also have to be vulnerable ourselves, right? Like, teachers need to be willing to say to parents, I don't know either. We have 4,000 colleges and universities in this country. We are just previously only about 10% of them taught teachers, pre-service teachers, how to effectively teach reading. So parents were getting up and sending their children to school trusting these professionals were going to teach their children how to read, and they just weren't equipped to do so. And now we see news articles and data coming out where those teachers that are content area specialists or they're fourth grade and above teachers, and they're saying, we don't know how to teach literacy. We need help too. So let's pair parents and teachers together. Let's let them learn together, right? Creating those spaces of vulnerability for both, I think it will exponentially change the conversation, right? But we have to make parents a part of the process. We have to check our biases at the door. I taught in schools in different settings for 15 years, and I know that there were water cooler conversations about how parents didn't care or that parent wasn't going to do X, Y, and Z. And we looked at it's really interesting because we are taught and trained and sometimes practice that the behavior of a child is symptomatic of a root cause. And we try to drill down and address those social and emotional things. We don't do that for parents oftentimes. So we'll look at a difficult parent, a helicopter mom, whatever, an absent dad, and we assume a lot. We have biases there. And we need to put those at the door. That's just the behavior. What is the root cause? How can I develop a relationship that they trust me enough to have a real conversation? I mean, I had a grandparent when I ran my first pilot of Dreams, and it was a 6-week, 3 days a week, a couple of hours each session. I had a grandmother. She was the first one to bring her grandson, the last one to leave. Because she wanted him to get everything he could out of these sessions. But the sessions were designed for the caregiver, the parent, to engage, and she would not. And I could not for the life of me figure it out. I said, what is going on? And what I realized, she didn't email, she didn't text. And any paper that you gave her just kind of went to the side. I said, she has her own literacy challenges. Yeah. I had a volunteer that didn't have a child to work with, but I thought she'd be a good fit. I said, Grandma, if I put you with this trained volunteer in a private space while we're working with your grandson, would you be willing? She said, yes. In that 8-week period of time, she built trust, because that didn't happen overnight. It was a couple of sessions before we got there, right? But in that 6-week period of time, she read her first Decodable book, something that she thought she'd never be able to do. We didn't embarrass her. We didn't shame her. We created an environment of trust, right? We had a private conversation. We gave her a private space. And she was able to learn alongside her grandchild. And they continue with a particular tutor that I had partnered them with. And this is, I think we're now like year 3 in with this particular family. But those types of stories are the stories in the I guess I'll say the stories or the interactions that we need to replicate in our schools, in our community centers, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, you name it. We need to do that so that parents really do feel they're heard, they're seen, right, they're cared for just as much as we care for that child.
No, that's very, very astute and insightful. Well, we could talk all day long. I would love to keep going all day long. I think we've come full circle here in the conversation. I always like to end with sort of future leaning conversations or questions. And we've been talking a little bit about the future and what you've been addressing, what needs to happen. So maybe give me that. Give me what's one or two things that need to happen to see the future that you sort of have outlined and described for us over the last 30 minutes that we've been talking?
Oh, gosh. A couple of things that need to happen. I think we need to be honest of where we are and where we're trying to go.
Okay.
We need to ask hard questions of organizations, businesses, curriculum companies, schools, school districts, all the players, the stakeholders in the space.
Right.
If what we have been doing isn't working, do we need to continue down the path? Or do we need to say this didn't work and eliminate it? Because that frees up resources for people that are having real results in moving our children and families forward to do even more prolific work, impactful work.
Right.
I think that's one thing. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Okay. Love it.
I also believe that success leaves breadcrumbs. And one of the things I'm clear about is immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation, the African American community of the South had a near 0% literacy rate.
Right.
Within 30 years or less, they were able to get to about a 70% literacy rate. No technology, no money, no resources for those community members, those members of our citizenry. We have to ask ourselves, are we really committed to doing the work? Because if they could do it then with nothing,
right,
but sheer will, we can do it today with all the money, the resources, the human capital, the financial capital that we had, the technology. There's no way on this earth that children and families should be illiterate with the amount of resources. We have to question structure systems that just don't work. And when we're really ready to forego power, position, and paychecks to really serve children and families well, I think it will begin to move things forward in a real way. That's what I think we need to do.
That's inspiring. And I appreciate you being able to come on and talk to us about that. And we feel the obligation on the software side of things. There's a broad community here, right? And we all have responsibility in it. So I'm going to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to have that conversation, and we need to make sure that success continues to leave breadcrumbs so we know where to go next. And
thank you for Mindplay. I know the people that watch regularly know what Mindplay is. It was a newer platform for me to learn about. But your work seems to be solid. It seems to be very impactful within schools. I'm ready to push you all outside of that and figure out how Mindplay can work within the home.
I love it.
So that parents that may not yet be comfortable creating those hands-on, engaging activities for their children to do, at least they may have something that they can do. And I tell parents, 15 minutes minimum, 45 minutes maximum. Like, you can do that while you're doing laundry, cooking dinner, but Mindplay would be a great tool for them to utilize. We're seeing the results. And so thank you all for the innovation, the expansion, the willingness to be uncomfortable and ask the tough questions and open up new markets doing this work, because it's so important.
Well, we feel the same way, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me on the show today. And I hope that we get the opportunity to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.